Especially in a job that includes so many non-musical elements, I think that being a band director and rehearsing and preparing a band for performance is the absolute best. It requires everything that you have in terms of musicianship, preparation, and problem solving, but when it all comes together, it's really fulfilling. My name is Peter Thompson. I'm a middle school band director, and this is the Amplified Warmups YouTube channel. In this video, I want to share some new rehearsal techniques that are really working well for my band this year. The band that I primarily work with is currently an 8th grade concert band of about 85 students, most of whom are in their 3rd or 4th year of band instruction. Some of these rehearsal techniques are ones that I've learned from really high performing programs around the country. Some of them have evolved from discussions with my colleagues, and some are just an extension of things that I've been doing for a while, but I've kind of taken them up a notch this year. Now, even though I've been learning a lot and trying a lot of new techniques, one thing that has remained the same, and that's my warm-up system. I'm really pleased at how well these exercises have held up against other systems, especially now that I'm working with students who've progressed through all 4 levels of amplified warm-ups. The best part is that students are making tremendous progress, yet this system takes away almost all the stress and pressure of getting rehearsals started. Using the audio countdown and accompaniment track means I never have to stand in front of the group waving my arms or raising my voice to get the band's attention. We also never have to delay the start of rehearsal due to any last-second emergencies. It's just kind of automatic. To learn more, go to amplifiedwarmups.com, where you can also download a free sample warm-up, print out the PDFs, and play the accompaniment part in your next rehearsal. Then check out the different levels of amplified warm-ups to find the best fit for your group. After 5 minutes of not having to stress out about getting rehearsals started, you'll be in a great headspace and ready to use these new rehearsal techniques. There is one step that I almost left off this list, and it's for the times when I'm still not in a good frame of mind after the warm-up. What we always do next is talk through our announcements, and to make sure I'm not carrying other negative energy through the rest of rehearsal, I always make my first announcement something that I'm grateful for. And as a perfectionist who tends to look for what's wrong, this helps me to refocus on what's right. Sometimes I've already thought of something to share in that, and sometimes I start announcements and realize that gratitude step is in there. And I think, oh, I have to think of something on the fly, even though I think I'm irritated. But taking a moment to recenter myself and give some affirmation to the band is always a big step toward having a productive rehearsal. For rehearsal itself, the most impactful thing that I've started doing this year is to break up the concert cycle into 3 phases. And they all start with the letter R: recognition, repetition, and refinement. With my band rehearsal schedule and performance calendar, it works to allocate about 1/3 of the time to each phase. So if we have 9 weeks to prepare for a concert, we'll spend 3 weeks in the recognition phase, 3 weeks for repetition, and the last 3 weeks for refinement. Let's break down the purpose of each one of these phases. In the recognition phase, the band is responsible for recognizing all of the challenges. What are the notes or fingerings they don't immediately know? What are the goal tempos, percussion stickings, alternate or trill fingerings? And what are the parts of the music that they're going to need to woodshed? I want to see a lot of pencils moving during the recognition phase, with students writing at everything that they don't immediately grasp. In short, after this phase is complete, students should know how to do everything in their music. They won't necessarily have developed all the skills that they need to perform it, but they should have grasped all the concepts that they need. In my mind, there's absolutely no excuse for a band getting close to a performance and someone repeatedly missing a key signature note or not knowing or fingering. That should all be nailed down in the recognition phase. As we rehearse the music in this phase, there's a huge priority placed on accuracy in all parts of the music. So not just pitches and rhythms, but also with articulations. That's another big one. The second phase is repetition. Now that we know all the conceptual information, we need to go about developing the skill to execute the music. And this comes through repetition, which starts very slowly. We focus on playing the difficult spots over and over. Even things like intonation challenges need to be practiced repeatedly, not just we get it right once and then we move on. In this time, we're also dealing to some extent with phrasing, although if we're playing at much slower rehearsal tempos, this can make that part difficult. So speaking of tempo, let me insert another technique that's working great for my band this year in rehearsal, and that's keeping the rehearsal tempo very slow for a much, much longer period of time than I would have ever done before. For example, the goal tempo for our fall concert opener was 172 beats per minute. We started rehearsing at half of that tempo, and we kept it there for a majority of the process, just focusing on accuracy, articulation, good tone, and intonation. Then in just the last few weeks, we started ramping up the tempo, and we were able to do that quickly and maintain accuracy. And so I would say through most of the repetition phase, keep the tempo slow enough to really focus on accuracy and hold the band to a high standard. The final phase of concert preparation is the refinement stage, where with an up-tempo piece, we're going to be working to lock in that goal tempo, although this is also where we start to work away from using the metronome and drone, and really homing in on balance, dynamics, and phrasing, and making sure the musical elements really take shape. One final thing I'll say about having these phases is it's not just for the sake of my own clarity and what we need to do during rehearsal. I let the band know what phase we're in and our timeline for transitioning to the next. It helps create a sense of urgency with what we're doing. Otherwise, students start to think, well, the concert is 2 months away. I don't really need to take this seriously yet. So knowing the purpose for each phase and what we're doing every day helps them to be clear about the responsibility for each rehearsal, not just when we get to crunch time. All right, so that covers the 3 phases of concert preparation as well as that insert technique about slow tempos. Let's talk about some other rehearsal techniques that are working well for my group this year. The next technique is something that mostly happens during the recognition phase, and this is the use of unison lines and rhythm lines. And what this means is during my score study, I'll identify parts of the music that are going to be challenging. So whether that's something with a key signature, tricky rhythms, technical runs, common melodies, I'll take that part of the music and enter it into notation, and then I'll put it in a format the whole band can see and play at the same time, and I'll insert that into a PowerPoint that we can put up on our screen. Then they can all work together in learning those aspects of the music. If you are interested in how I go about creating these unison lines efficiently, I have another video that walks step by step through that process. And once you get the hang of it, you'll be able to create these unison lines quickly. Another rehearsal technique that I've been using to really set my band up for success is taking more liberties with the score. And the reason for this is because no piece is going to be a 100% fit for my group. If I know that a passage is going to be beyond what all my clarinets can play well, or not within the trumpet player's range, or is not going to need 17 flutes playing above the staff, I'll have some of those players take it down an octave. Or I might reallocate some notes. For example, right now my trombone section is small, so carrying 3-note chords is challenging. However, I have some very capable baritone players, and I don't need all 5 of them just doubling the tuba part up an octave. So I've farmed out some of the trombone notes to individual baritone players. One rule that I adhere to in this process, though, is not going outside of the score. That is, I don't put notes in an octave that's not already in another part. For example, if I'm having the flutes take it down, that lower octave needs to be in either the oboe part or the clarinet. If the clarinets are taking it down, maybe it's in the sax part or something like that. It all comes down to maintaining the integrity of what the composer intended. Sometimes these adjustments are simple enough that I can just communicate them verbally during rehearsal. Other times they take a little bit more and actually require me to put some of the music into finale to reprint it for the section. And that can take a lot of time, but one thing I always try to consider is if I can spend extra time outside of rehearsal in order to save rehearsal time for the group, it's almost always worth it. And this kind of work is very effective at setting the band up for success. Now, if that last adjustment was about making the music more accessible for more of the band, this final technique is actually about having less of the band play the music in performance. And this is something that happens late in the process, so definitely in the refinement stage. But one of my last steps in getting ready for a performance has been to cut individuals out of certain passages. And this could happen for a couple of reasons. One is when a student just isn't playing the music well. When we've come to the end of the process and the music still isn't learned, I start cutting out measures for some students. There are a couple of ways of looking at this. One is if you're just contributing wrong notes, that part of the music shouldn't be played because that's just bringing down the performance level of the whole group. 2, cutting out inaccurate playing sets a performance standard. So either I gave you an unrealistic part to learn, or you just needed to do some more work in order to learn it. This is a process that requires a lot of trust and confidence in you as the band director because it's possible to encounter some hurt feelings, maybe even some pushback as students argue that they play it better with the group or they played it better when they were practicing at home. Or maybe they think that they're actually playing it right, In these cases, if you have put a timeline in place, you can say, well, this key signature mistake that's happening here should have been cleared up in the recognition phase, or you should have brought this up to performance tempo in the repetition phase. But even if you take the time to learn it before the concert, we've missed the whole refinement part of the process. So we need you to just leave this part of the music out. The other reason to cut some students out of some passages might be that they're actually pretty strong players and it's stronger than what's needed for that part of the music. For example, most young band music is written with the assumption that young low brass sections aren't going to be real strong. But if you have a full section and they're all playing the accompaniment part, it might be too much for that clarinet solo that's happening at the same time. Or maybe you want to create some contrast in your performance. Maybe you have a section of the piece where your whole band is playing forte, and you could take the section right before it and try to make that more transparent or more delicate. In either of those cases, I will often say, let's go to one stand per part. And we do that late in the process, so every player will have been working on the music in rehearsal all along, and they'll have to be ready to play the part, but they might sit out a few measures for the sake of the overall performance, and it usually pays off big time. That's it for new rehearsal strategies. Be sure to check out 2 other videos on new systems that are working well for our band program, as well as a video on intonation techniques for middle school students. If this video has been helpful, please consider subscribing, liking, and sharing. All those will help these videos reach other band directors. Also, feel free to email me, peter@amplifiedwarmups.com, if there's anything that I can do to be of service to you. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you soon.